Because different cultures have different ideals and what they consider normal, there are obviously going to be different cultural responses to intersex or intersex individuals. So some cultures are a lot more accepting than others. North American and European societies generally, like we said, have very rigid sex boundaries. And so intersex is then considered a disorder requiring surgical correction. Okay? Sex assignment surgeries are intended to help individuals fit in. So at birth, the doctor notices that an individual will be categorized as intersex or has sexual organs of both male and female. So the idea is to help that individual fit into our cultural standards and rigid sex boundaries. They do what's called sex assignment surgery, and that usually they pick a sex for the baby and they do a very quick, very simple surgery to make that individual appear as one sex or the other. Okay, this can sometimes be more harmful than it is beneficial. So infants will grow up and they don't associate with the sex that was chosen for them at birth. Okay, and so this can be kind of damaging and difficult as the individual ages, because they aren't their biological sex anymore, that has been chosen for them separately. Okay, so if we want to talk about hormones, right? So hormones play a large role in determining sex differences. Males have testosterone and females have estrogen. So this is actually a complete myth. This is not true. Okay, we often think about hormones being the deciding factor in males and females, and that males have testosterone and females don't, and this is a very clear biological way to talk about sex in our society. But that's not actually true. So testosterone does play a larger role in male bodily function, and estrogen plays a larger role in female bodily function, but both males and females produce both of these hormones in variable quantities. So it's not as easy as picking out one characteristic that is traditionally considered male and looking at it and testing for it biologically and saying, well, that clearly is a male individual. Okay, so behavioral characteristics like aggression, dominance, and violence are very complicated and expressed in specific cultural contexts, and because they're expressed differently because of different genders and our expectations of those genders. So you can't even reduce simple behaviors to a correlation or a cause and effect of hormones. Okay, so we like to think about hormones and things like this playing a very strong role in our definitions of sex and gender, when really they don't. Okay, it just makes it easier to put them in categories if we associate hormones with these very strict categories, but we don't. Okay, hormones are much more fluid. Every person's level of hormones is different from their neighbors. So then, in what ways are men and women unequal? In terms of culture, men, with very few exceptions globally, hold leadership roles in societies. So anthropologists are interested in why that is. And so in the Victorian era, anthropologists began to question whether all societies treated women unequally as European or American societies did, or if there were some that had a more egalitarian system between sexes. Never really got very far until The Second Sex was published in the late 40s there. And so now most feminist anthropologists agree that cultural ideology and relationships play a greater role in inequality than gender or than biological differences do. So we're recognizing that it's really cultural, these differences, and less biological at this point. So there's been a long-standing debate over sexual inequality. In the 60s and 70s, there's an ongoing debate about if the causes of inequality were universal. So inequality there are two schools of thought. So inequality is universal owing to some basic associations. So women are associated with nature in the domestic sphere and men with culture in the public sphere. The second idea was that inequality was not fundamental, but was a result of specific historical processes like capitalism and colonialism. So these are two different ideas about the level of sexual inequality in the Western world. So was it either that inequality is some basic association, so women are associated with nature and the domestic sphere, or was it that inequality is not quite so fundamental, but is really a historical process linked to capitalism and colonialism? Okay. Really, this is unresolved, but we do know that inequality is not a thing but a process. So what we try to focus on now in feminist anthropology or anthropology in general is that we're going to think about how is that process performed and reproduced, rather than what causes the inequality, but focusing on it as a process instead of as a thing.